cultural, and diverse. And then connected to maybe the previous three, it is also caste ridden, that in India, most of the people, we would claim to have belonged to one caste, and that becomes actually a point of discrimination for many of us. Well, as a person, as a Dalit, and as a Christian, because I also a religious person and I am a Christian, and if I am discriminated because of my religion, probably I would not mind, or as much as I would mind somebody discriminating me because of my caste and my gender, because the caste and gender were not my choice. I was just simply born into it. But of course, my faith was my choice. So if somebody just discriminates on the basis of that, I can still understand. But why should somebody discriminate me on the basis of my skin color and caste is something that I cannot really, stomach well. But this is what happens most of the times in our country, and also in some other countries where society is very, very patriarchal. Priyanka Semi, who is a Dalit rights activist associated with India's National Freedom, she has written this. She says that on a humid day in October 1929, in a village in southern India, a girl was born to a young Dalit couple. Soon after her birth, her parents took her outside and rolled her in a heap of garbage. The act conveyed to the gods their displeasure at not having been blessed with a boy. The girl named Kupamma, or woman born to garbage, was my maternal grandmother. So this tells you the story. It is not only the story of Priyanka Sami, but also many others in India, where parents normally actually would like to have a boy. They think that a boy can actually, prolong their lineage, all this and that, and can bring blessings. And if a girl is born, not many people are really happy. Well, now things are changing, but in a traditional, Indian family and Indian society, this is quite often, seen. People aspiring to have a son and a daughter is always considered a burden or a curse. And if somebody is born into that kind of society and a situation, then the prejudice is really doubled, and the atrocities against them, the discrimination is also really worse. And we are talking about Dalit women who constitute 16% of India's women populations, and that should be around 80 million roughly. And many of these women, they are into manual scavenging. Now, manual scavenging is something, as you can see in this picture also, that a woman cleaning actually an open toilet, with her hands. And why this kind of a job, menial job, is actually relegated to this particular community or this women group is because they are uneducated. They cannot work anywhere else. So at least, but here they can work and also get some money. So they work in a very unhygienic, conditions to just, earn bread for their family. And most of the women actually, they do that. And as I told you, that this double discrimination, that caste and gender both, which is actually not their choice, they are simply born into that, but because of patriarchal society, the prejudice is always double. They get raped, and that rape is also sometimes is a form of retaliations, particularly in the villages. Once a girl is raped, she becomes unmarriageable. So if there is a dispute between actually a Dalit family and an upper caste family, then usually, the upper caste people would target and rape the female members of that family. And by doing that, what they do, that they make that girl unmarriageable. And so this is actually the fate of most of the women. And every day when we read the newspapers, in India, there would be actually many cases in different parts of the country, reporting this form of retaliations and violence. One of the slides actually I missed, somehow they did not get uploaded. I would have otherwise given you a statistic that according to 2020, 2020, the highest number of actually violence against Dalit women were from most of the northern parts of India. But I missed that slide. When I send it to you, Morgana, probably I can add that and send it to you. And then there is also a case of a heavy human trafficking involving actually Dalit women. And why that happens is somebody actually says that India is untouchable during the day and touchable in the night. What they mean by saying that most of these girls who are trafficked and they're pushed into prostitutions, they are mostly from the poor Dalit families, because they are brought to cities to serve people with money, and because they are poor, just for a couple of 100 rupees, they just agree to come and work in cities, and then eventually they fall prey to these human traffickers, and they get into prostitutions, and they never get out of that situation again. If they resist, then they are killed. And so there is a lot of actually news of murder, and also there is an honor killing that involves the Dalits in different parts of India. And there are a lot of Bollywood movies also that you can really watch to see what it is like. Then if this is what is happening, then is the civil society silent? What is the civil society doing? India is one country where you have a lot of social movements and a lot of NGOs, and even the government is also working for actually them. And what is civil society doing is that they are trying to empower and build the capacity of Dalit women through education, because I also believe that an educated person is always less discriminated against, so that education plays an important role, and that is what civil society is doing. And then the second thing is they're also challenging religious beliefs and practices of injustice. Most of the practices that we say, the so-called religious practices, sometimes they do not have the perspective of justice, and therefore they blindly actually practice those, and that create imbalance and injustice, and that chuck people to the margins, social margins, and to the periphery. So the civil society is actually now challenging and asking actually religious groups to actually reform their beliefs, their ideologies, and align their religious beliefs and practices with social justice, and particularly justice and equality. And they're also trying to promote intercaste marriages. This is probably one of the practical ways where actually the society can see that people of different castes are actually mingled together. Of course, there is a challenge also. Sometimes this intercaste marriages can also lead to honor killing, because no upper caste family would like to have actually a girl from a Dalit community in their family. And sometimes if that happens, because if they fall in love and they get married, sometimes then they are killed, and that is called actually honor killing, that they want to actually keep their honor by killing the bride. And they're also, the civil society is also demanding constitutional amendment and affirmative action for all. There is something called positive discrimination policy by the government of India, and this affirmative actions has the provision of reservations actually for the people belonging to Dalit communities, or what you call scheduled caste and scheduled tribe people, that they get reservations and they get some benefits and some privileges, even in the schools and colleges, in their jobs, all this and that. But that affirmative action is not for all the Dalits. In 1950 presidential order, the caste is very closely connected with religions. So therefore, Dalits belonging only to Hindu, Sikh, and Buddhist, these three religions, can only get this affirmative action and this positive discrimination policy. They can actually avail the benefits of this. But the Muslims, Muslim Dalits and the Christian Dalits and others, they cannot. And the justification is that because, once a person gets converted into actually Christianity or, Islam, they think that, caste doesn't exist there and they are not discriminated against. But, even after, conversion, these people, they clung to their, caste identity, and the caste follows them wherever they go. So no religion is actually in India without caste practice or this practice of this untouchability. I should not say untouchability, because in the 1950, this untouchability was constitutionally abolished, but it is very much still in practice, and many people seem to be still practicing in different places. And there are also places where there are different temples, different churches for different groups of people. There are Dalit churches, there are even burial grounds, that there should be one for Dalits and one should be for, upper caste people. So even after death, also the caste, still follows. So this is what the civil society is doing. They're trying to demand a constitutional amendment and affirmative action for all. And in order to do that, they are demanding that the caste should be delinked from religion, so that those who are Dalits in different regions can get the benefits of this. And as a result of this, what is happening is now the feminist social movements for peace and justice is growing across the country, and we can see many women leaders and people, even some Dalit women have become the chief ministers of different states also. So that is also slowly happening. But at the grassroots, it is also picking up, and at least they're able to raise their voice against the atrocities that they have been facing in the society. So this is what is happening as a result of the involvement of civil society. So I would stop here and would like to actually answer or clarify any questions if anybody has. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Castor. That was really, really informative. I think for many of us, it's difficult to understand what really goes on. But as you said, there is a huge difference between what happens in the cities and what happens in the rural villages. So much of India is still very much a rural community. So it takes a long time for change to come. Carola's asked actually, hang on, just let me close that and then I can read your question, Carola. I mean, you can ask it yourself if you like, Carola. Would you like to ask it yourself?
I wanted to ask if anything has improved since you experienced this as a child, because you're talking about various things, but in your experience, has anything improved?
Of course, Carola, a lot of things has improved. I told you, that's why I told you my age, that now I am 47, and this is what was my experience when I was just 5-6 years old. So in the meantime, a lot of things have changed, and this change is there because of actually education, all this and that. And mostly what the civil society is doing, this the Dalit issue has also been internationalized. So sometimes, when such an issue, in the guise of, racism is discriminated at international level, then, that also sends my country and my, countrymen. And then, we become very proactive, upholding the right and dignity of the Dalits in our community. And that has really helped.
Yeah. I remember seeing the response when women or young girls had to cross fields and then they were raped. Were they Dalits? Because that was never gone into in these reports. You just heard about these young girls and they were subjected to rape by many men out of their village or whatever. So were they Dalit?
Yes, they were. Yeah, and that was related to actually a land dispute. So yes, they were Dalits. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. Thank you, Custer.
Yeah, pleasure.
And anybody else got any questions? My question is, I mean, I've seen it happening during the pandemic. At one point, we had a campaign from URI Netherlands in cooperation with Latin America for the indigenous people and marginalized people who were actually suffering a huge loss of income because of the pandemic. I saw that also happening to other marginalized groups. What kind of experience have you had of the Dalit communities during the last 2 years? Have you had any real insight, or can you tell us a little bit about how they've really managed to get through the pandemic? What have been the biggest problems for Dalit people during the pandemic?
Well, see, many Dalit women and Dalit men, they lost their livelihood in the pandemic. These are all what we say, the small business people. They just sell things on the streets. These are all actually street hawkers kind of people, and because of the pandemic and the lockdown, they were not allowed to actually sell their things on the streets because everybody was asked to stay home, and they did not have any means of selling their stuff online. It's not like actually having a Zoom meeting. If they have to survive, means they have to go to the streets and sell their things. People have to come and buy, and then only they can earn a living. And that did not happen. And many of them even committed suicides. You must have also read some stories about actually people selling their bicycles to feed their family. But how long can they survive? The lockdown was so long, and some people actually committed even suicides because they could not take care of their families. And then many of these people who were also living in the metro cities when working in the construction companies, they also lost their jobs, and then they were forced to walk on foot to their villages, and many of them have walked hundreds of miles to reach their homes. Of course, so the media gave a very good coverage when they were actually traveling from Delhi and Mumbai to their villages, but nobody knows what happens after they reach their homes, because they were also not in their villages for so long. So if they still had something that they could live on in their villages was still a question that has not been answered. And we have not been able to also do any research on that because of the lockdown. Slowly things are opening, and hopefully we will get to know if they are still there.
Yeah. Hannah,
I had a question, actually, a remark first. I want to thank you so much, Kasta, for sharing this beautiful and touchy story with us, because we all know about, we have read about it, but when you are hearing it, telling your story is so touchy, so it's so good, it comes in. Eh? So I was wondering, actually, a question, because you shared with us how you were treated when you were a young boy in class. My question is, how did you regain your dignity to become the man that you have been now? It is wonderful, because I think when you are small and you've got a lot of pushing like this, you become small, but you are a man of, you have become something. Let me say so. So where did you find your power, the strength to do that?
My family. It was my family. My parents actually kept on insisting that I should continue my studies. See, when I saw this thing, that I also realized I was questioning myself that why I'm made to sit in a corner, and I am not allowed to play with my other classmates there. And then when I reported to my parents, they said that don't worry, you are there in this school, because this was the primary school in my village. Okay, so where you can have go until you are 10 years old. And then said that, okay, after 5 years, you are going to change your school, so things would be better. Just, endure it, that kind of a thing. And they said that things will be better. So hoping that things would be better when I leave the school and, get into another one, I continued my studies. Then I went to this, middle school, where I was there for 2 years. And there the thing was still the same. And then my parents would say, don't worry, just 2 years. After 2 years, you are going to high school. There things would be definitely different. Then I went to high school, and there it was again the same. So I would say that my parents, this is how actually they kept on encouraging me that I should not give up, I should get good education. They always believed that, education is one thing, that can really help us overcome this caste-based discriminations. Because you have to gain a self-esteem, that you have to feel that, okay, you are not less human, you can still do something. And that kind of a confidence comes only when you get educations.
Absolutely. Kieran's also got a question for you, Casta. Kieran, yeah, you've unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
Thanks, Morgana. Thank you, Casta. Thank you for sharing with us. Very moving. There's so much injustice, and indeed a lot of criminal activity that I picked up, that's going on. I just had a comment really, and that is that this kind of thing we see here in the West, in the UK as well. And I think the overarching issue is the fact that these illegal activities which go against humanity, our human rights. And my question then is, how do you feel that we, as a global community, can be more supportive? And how can we, work to encourage change? Because that's the real thing. What is the real change that we can make, do you think?
Well, the real thing that we can do is to actually understand the discriminating and the discriminating potential of our religious beliefs and practices, because most of these things that we see, particularly in our part of the world, is because of our religious beliefs and practices. I don't want to blame any religion, because as I told you that now this is there in every religion. So here in the Netherlands, actually, I was just speaking in one of the churches, and here also I face a lot of discrimination, because when I was looking for accommodations for myself, I have faced actually kind of a discrimination. And then people are also asking me that, how do you feel about this? You must be feeling terrible. Then I told them that no, what I have experienced is actually worse than what I'm experiencing here. And so probably as a global community, what we can do is to actually stay connected with each other and support each other in our struggle for life. And we should have that perspective of justice. If I always believe that, if there is anything that we can do, then that is to reform ourselves. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, no, that if you want to see the change, then you be the change yourself. Then if our attitude towards others can change, and if we can accept each other as they are, then probably we can make a difference as peacemakers. And probably as a global community, if we can turn the whole world into a global village where we really meet each other, then accept each other, we understand each other, because a lot of this discrimination is because of our misunderstanding of each other. So we have to cultivate a culture of understanding each other and accepting each other as we are.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I know you mentioned that all religions, it's happening in all religions. From my perspective, all the religions teach us about equality, love, respect, and working together. I think it's the practice. So it's people who are not practicing their religion properly,
exactly,
rather than the religion itself. And we see a lot of that around the world, where people are doing things in the name of religion which go against the grain of the teachings. So I just thought it would be important to differentiate between it's people who are practicing a religion as opposed to the religion discriminating itself. And I think, we can work to ensure that those who are practicing practice fully. And if we are practicing it fully from the heart, then we wouldn't be, doing any of these things that, encourage injustice and harm to anybody.
Yeah. That is true. That is true. Actually, I think we are very conservative, and we are very selective in our practices and beliefs.
So any more questions or comments? I absolutely agree with Kieran. In fact, for the Parliament of World Religions, Kieran actually we participated in one of our panels and talked about walking the spiritual talk. And one of our things is, how can you stand behind a religion but use it also to blame somebody else. And you know, we always say in the Netherlands, when you're pointing at somebody else, there are 3 fingers pointing at yourself. So but Kieran and I are really, you know, very adamant about, you know, it's what people do, and it doesn't take much to really, what we're trying to say is also appreciative inquiry. Carola, part of what we've been doing with these in dialogue meetings is also to share how we feel, you know, when somebody talks to us. So hearing your personal experiences, Casper, are really, really so important, because it helps us to understand, what does it really feel like? You know, people, you mentioned as well that people do things jokingly, but some of these matters are not a joke at all, especially when people are dying. And I think you haven't mentioned, perhaps, I don't know whether you want to mention it, but I do know that marginalized women, not just Dalit women, but also women in rural areas in Africa, are often accused of, for example, witchcraft.
Witchcraft, yeah.
And I think that this is also something which people are not aware of. And a lot of these witchcraft accusations are actually coming from the evangelical church. And one of the things they want to do is, you know, earn money, and it sounds really horrible, by saying, oh, well, your child is possessed by the demon, and because of this woman's cast a spell, and then they charge money for exorcisms. Does anything like that happen to Dalit women that you're aware of, or has anything happened like that?
Well, in India also there are some cases like that. That Dalit women have been accused of actually this witchcraft, all this and that. And it's not only women, of course, the men, Dalit men also. Because I have been in some villages in Odisha, so I know that, you know, how these Dalit women were accused of this. And then, you know, this, what they said, this Gram Panchayat kind of thing, it's like a village court, you know, then that lady would be brought to the village court, and where people would just, you know, ask her questions, and sometimes, you know, they would do a lot of, you know, terrible things to just humiliate her. And sometimes, you know, they are paraded naked, and, you know, all those things are also there. That's sort of a punishment that they give for, you know, what she allegedly, she might have done, you know, that's what they think. Yes, I have seen that, but probably these cases are probably more in Africa than in India, but it is there, very much there in India as well. And since I focused my, you know, talk only on Indian society, I didn't touch much about this issue in Africa, but it is pretty much there in India as well.
Thank you. It's now time for us to wind up, as we say. So Carola, I'd like to ask you to close our meeting, and over to you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Morgana and Custer, it's been a very enlightening evening. Having been a victim of physical abuse myself, domestic violence, many, many years ago, 40 years ago, and having a very long spiritual journey to get past all the things that it brought about, this meant a lot to me this evening, because I always shied away from these things, because, yeah, even after 40 years, it's to hear that it's still there, it's still a problem for so many women, it hurts. But I wanted to share a quote with you from Malala Yousafzai. I can't say her name. Yousafzai. We all know who she is. But I find this a very nice and fitting end to the talk. I raise up my voice, not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot succeed when half of us are held back. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Carol. And again, tomorrow is International Women's Day, but let's have Women's Day every day. And,
Absolutely.
and again, think about all the women in Afghanistan who are really struggling now.
Yeah.
But also, again, in Turkey, where they're not being recognised for, murders. And so let's all pray and hope that many women will find the light and find a community who will accept them again.
And help them
Yeah.
heal. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so
Yeah.
happy Women's Day to all of
Happy
you.
Women's Day,
Thank
everybody.
you.
And a
Thank you
happy
so
Women's
much.
Day.
You
Yes.
make our world really beautiful. So
Thank you.
stay
Oh.
blessed and beautiful
Thank
always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Okay.
So